Mixing with Mike, plugin of the week comes from MixWave. It's the Quad 8 MM-310. Quad 8 is a company that goes back to the early 1960s. I believe it was an offshoot of Electrodyne. And they started making consoles in Southern California for the film industry, doing custom consoles. The Quad 8 name actually has an interesting history. Apparently, there was a console design that actually was part of a process, I think, of converting 35 millimeter film to 8 millimeter for home use or home viewing. But they actually stacked up the 8 millimeters side by side in a 35 millimeter format. And so I think what this did is what this console did, or this custom setup did, was it transferred everything over to all of the tracks, and then it could be sliced up, but they could use their existing 35 millimeter format. Hence quad, meaning 4, 8 as an 8 millimeter, 4 8 millimeters sort of stacked together, and there you have it. The rest is history. The design is actually a passive design, a passive EQ design. Now, when I first called up this, I didn't know anything about it. Usually when I call up a plugin, I'll kind of go through it, get a feel for what it can do, what it sounds like. And the first thing I thought is this sounds like a passive EQ. And as I started to dig in and do a little bit of research, it sure enough is an inductor design. It is also a transformer balanced preamp stage. So transformers are a big part of the sound. I believe there's also an op amp at the output stage. All of which has been emulated here by MixWave expertly. And, let's kind of dive into it. I think it's pretty straightforward. I have, it's basically a 3-band EQ. We have a mic and a line selection here, which you can select here. So if you switch to the mic, you can get into saturation of it. One of the things that you have to be conscious of is that it is not entirely, or it doesn't sound like it's not gain offset, right? So as you switch to mic, make sure you're pulling down your fader at the output level to kind of counterbalance for that. So that's something to consider. You'll get a more subtle transformer saturation if you drive the input in line. You get a more aggressive sound if you're switching over to the mic setting. And just something to kind of be conscious of. I have a few of the tracks where I've driven them a little bit, not with the mic setting, but I'll demonstrate that to so you have an idea of what it's all about. Now, there's a little light here which makes you think it's connected here to the shelving switch here, but it's not. That's the EQ in. If the EQ is out, the preamp and output is still active, so you'll still get the tonal coloration from that. If the EQ is in, then obviously you get the full EQ circuitry. It is a 3-band EQ, starting with the high frequency. What we have is we can make it a shelving EQ or a peaking bell curve EQ. The selection of frequencies is 3K, 5K, 7K, 10K on the outer end here. And then we have 10 dB of boost and attenuation. So you can kind of go through stepped increments all the way out on that end, and then just kind of switch this in as you want. So it could be either peaking or shelving EQ there. The mid-range is a fixed parametric EQ. It is actually a proportional Q design, right? So as you drive it further, it will get narrower and more focused. And what you have for frequencies here, 400, 700, 1.5, and 3K, right? So those are your selections there in the mid-range band. The low frequency band is sort of split. There is a shelving EQ at 50 and 140, and then we have it says shelf here. No, it's a peaking EQ at 250 and 400. All right, so you can drive there, get to like probably more of a bell dip or something like that, or maybe if you're pushing into a Fender Rhodes or something like that, you might do a boost, get a little warmth out of something, and then a shelving EQ on the low end. Very musical sounding, very clean and open sounding. Some people say it has kind of a mixture of the characteristics of a Neve console, 80 series Neve, like 1073, somewhere between there and an API. I'm not sure that I would exactly describe it that way because neither of those are passive EQ designs. And so this has a different sonic characteristic that you kind of bit more transparent. I've always felt like, although it's not actually true, that the passive EQ designs are closer to linear phase, or about as linear phase as you can get in the analog realm, and you just can't get there. You can't get there in the digital realm either, but that's a whole other bag of worms. So rather than getting into that, let's kind of dive into some of the settings here. Let's start by a quick A/B of what we have here in the mix. I'm just going to do an instrumental to start up with, and then we'll dive into the EQ as we go into some of the individual settings, just so you can get a sense of basically what it sounds like. Maybe I'll call it one of the EQs, so you have something to look at other than a bunch of tracks. Here we go. Okay, so just to give you an idea, I mean, this is basically raw. These are the raw tracks unprocessed, no other compression. There's a little trim control to balance something out here, a little imager there to maybe correct something with the overheads. And aside from that, and a de-esser on the vocal, you know, pretty much straightforward. So just to kind of give you an idea of like how much it can really open up the sound field, right? And some of the boosts on this are pretty aggressive. One of the things that's sort of an interesting characteristic of a lot of the analog, vintage analog gear, because this is going back, this design is going back to the early 60s. And so if you think about what the competing consoles, you got 80 series, Neve, you know, you got API desks coming out, you know, Helios console, which is also a passive design. And so in that time, you've got to think like this is actually a very flexible EQ, you know, for that particular time. And you can actually really go a long way in terms of the tonal shaping with it as you start to dig into it. But one thing that's really amazing is just the kind of clarity of it, which I really love, particularly when you push in the top end. And that's always a tell for me with a plugin. If a plugin is well emulated, is actually how clean the top end is. Because that smoothness of the top end is not a very easy thing to do, and very few plugins really capture it well. And I thought this captured it really well, and that adds a lot of air, which really opens up the depth field here. So you can see how like it just removes all of that mud. But one of the things I was going to point out here is that when you get into a lot of these EQs, the more that you kind of drive into them in terms of boosting, one with the proportional EQ, they become more focused, but also what you get is you're also driving a bit more saturation through the gain stages of each of the amplifiers as you kind of go through the different parts of the EQ. Pass that on, and then you're obviously pulling the output gain down, right? And you know, hence you end up with to balance it out level wise, and what you end up with is something that basically is very subtractive in nature, because everything that's not boosted is taken away when you pull the fader down, right? So it kind of just to kind of balance it out. But if I let's just kind of break down, just start with the drums here first, and then we'll kind of go through things one by one. Okay, saved it. There's a wonderful shortcut that they added in Pro Tools where if you click on the Command key over the plugin, it'll just remove it. And if you also hold the Option key, it will wipe everything out. But you have a sort of brief minute where you can click out of it. So I almost had a little disastrous moment there. All right, so just kind of getting into the kick drum EQ, if I just sort of solo up here and kind of go instrument, I kind of, or track by track rather, I was kind of driving this a little bit just to kind of get, you know, a little bit more saturation out of it. And I just wanted to kind of show a little bit of that here, maybe with this or with the toms or something, right? Right, so you could drive that a little bit more just to kind of get like and it's subtle, right? This is not like a super aggressive one. Maybe the toms here are a better call for this. So maybe if I call up, you know, here I have basically, you can see how much I'm boosting on the top end with the toms, right? So it's a rack tom here and a floor tom here. So you could see like how much air you can get out of it. I think I was probably better off here, backed off a bit and kind of pulled in rather than driving that transformer in there. Listen to that in the context of the mix. Another interesting thing is that it doesn't have a phase inversion switch, which you think would be like a, you know, for a recording console, like that would be kind of a main feature of it. Interesting, you know. I mean, they're staying true to the original design, but that's, you know, just an interesting thing, insight there, that there was no space for just a little phase inversion. Let's see here. So we got, this is the overhead track. Okay, so let me just kind of solo this up here. We see very filtered on the low end. That extra boost there actually helps the low end of the toms in particular, particularly the rack tom. Just one other quick thing that I just wanted to do here, which I could do just for the drums, is just to show you here what the saturation setting would be like. So let me just... And then actually, I didn't set it up here, but you can also run, you know, with oversampling here, which will help. probably not necessarily appropriate for this, but if you just wanted to get a sense of what the mic saturation was like, that would basically give you kind of a good idea quickly. Just a couple other things. Bass, right? Really great clarity and kind of punch in the mid-range without sounding artificial, just very smooth, not smearing at all. And you could drive into it pretty aggressively. And the low end warmth is still very clear in there. On the other end, this is like an example with the guitar part where you can really drive into the mid-range frequencies, right? And that's where that proportional EQ thing is really amazing. That's why API EQs are so great with guitars, exactly for that reason, when you really want to kind of drive in and get like a really sharp tone out of a guitar. So it's really perfect for that. Then there's piano, right, where you want a bit more natural openness and warmth and body, right? Just like love the way it just kind of really opens up the sound, which is great. That's always like a thing, particularly like I said with the top end, not sounding cold, having a smoothness to it, right? But also the body down on the low end kind of maintain like a good well-formed imaging character, so it doesn't so it supports whatever boost that you do, no matter how aggressive on the top end. Here's a 10K shelving boost, or actually should be a shelving boost, up on the vocal here.
I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived. They're building cars that drive themselves now, sending civilians into space. They got experts on the TV and the radio, presenting the facts for one side of the case.
Again, just like really natural, open, beautiful clarity. Has all that character that you love about a passive EQ design, very Pultec-like, on the top end, and in particular like that 3K boost in the mid-range. Really great. This is like a great new addition for love console plugins. So obviously there's so many reviews of all the different ones that have come in, and some of these more, outside of the normal big players, SSL and Neve and API and some of those things. It's great to see some of these old consoles that go way back, that have a real amazing character, that were part of so many great records. Although this was originally kind of designed a bit more in the film industry, it quickly found its way into recording studios, and there's still many places that have them. And actually the company Quad 8 reformed more recently, and is actually continuing to release products. So I don't know if they just still do full console design, but if you have one, they'll probably repair it for you. Great stuff. Really a nice, fantastic emulation by MixWave. Really love it. Definitely worth checking out. Do a demo at minimum. See how it fits into your workflow. And I think it's worth it. Check it out. Plugin of the week from MixWave. Quad 8 MM-310.